Okay, it looks like we're going to be here. I will open the budget committee meeting Wednesday, May 11th. Initially, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, our first task is to appoint a chair and a vice chair. Yeah.
Be one of the counselors.
can.
And just volunteer.
Funny how that happens. You can bring it in.
I thought he learned last night.
Yeah, didn't we
I thought you would have been
we
sitting
did that last
there.
night.
Do we have any nominations?
Wasn't Sharon chairman last time?
Yeah, she's not on the committee
Oh,
anymore.
she's no longer out here.
But she's on the phone or Zoom.
We could name her
She did such a good job.
executive. Ex officio chair.
Well, we could sit here for an hour and figure it out, or
What?
I'll do it if somebody wants me to do it.
I nominate Paul.
Sure, I'll do it. Tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Listen to Lori for.
Yeah.
I second it.
Comfortable with that, Paul?
I'm comfortable with anything.
Great.
We'll back you.
He said it was a terrific day today,
Yeah.
so.
I like your attitude.
Really need a,
Do we-
we don't really need a,
We need to vote on it.
do we?
No, you can just, all in favor.
Okay, Paul's been nominated. Anybody else nominations? So who would approve of Paul? Vote aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. Now we still need a vice chair in case Paul can't. Anybody?
Well, since you volunteered, maybe I'll nominate you as vice chair.
Okay, I'll do it.
So I nominate Sam Stidell as vice chair, budget committee.
Second.
Any other nominations? No? All in favor?
Yes,
Yes.
Aye.
At that,
just make sure Paul's here.
Yeah, I'll be here.
at that, I will turn it over to Paul. So you're in charge from now on.
Last was a script, right?
Well, there's, I think it's under the agenda
On
tab.
the agenda, okay.
So let's go back to do the minutes first, go to minutes. Yep.
The first item is the May 5th, 2021.
And just FYI, we can't do these as a consent, all three as one consent.
Oh, we can. Okay, I wish. So, the first order is the, minutes for May 5, 2021, 12, 2021, May 16. Who's board online, I would ask if everyone had a chance to look at them.
Yes.
Case, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes for the budget committee for May 15th, 2020 and March 10th, 2021.
Second.
None.
Oh, wait, is that?
Oh, never mind.
Well, there's another one. Yeah. Restate that. Approve the minutes of May 3rd, 2021,
May 5th.
May 12th, 2021, and March 16th, 2022.
Second?
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Passed. Okay. Next order of business is the public hearing, state shared revenues.
Public comment.
There is a script there that you can read for us. Item B that's attached to my staff report.
Part of the agenda here.
Yes. Toward the end, like toward the back. I think it's like the last page,
Last page.
very last.
Page
No, all the way in the back. So let's go.
Thank you. This time pursuant to ORS 221.770, I will open the public hearing in order to give the citizens of Cannon Beach the opportunity to comment on the use of state revenue sharing fund in the city of Cannon Beach's budget fiscal year 2022 to 2023. Staff, please present the report.
Okay, every year, state law requires that all cities participating in the state shared revenue program conduct a public hearing before the budget committee in order to take public comment on the possible uses of the funds. We published a public hearing notice on May 5th, and the proposed budget includes estimated revenue from state shared revenues in the amount of $194,887. And I show a spreadsheet that shows the breakdown. The general fund amount is $80,409. And that is from liquor tax, cigarette tax, marijuana tax, and the state revenue sharing, which is primarily liquor tax. And then the other item is in the road fund, and that is our highway fund, gas tax. And that's estimated to be $114,407 budget. 94,887.
Is there any member of the public wishing to comment on the proposed use of state revenue sharing for fiscal year 2022 to 2023?
Regular comment for the budget. I don't know
That's item 3.
That's
You can address, Jan can be on item 3.
Anybody, let's see if there's anybody online. Just ask online if there is anybody listening as an raise their hand.
There's no.
That's Alicia. She's a member. I'm asking for the audience.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I will close the public hearing at this time. Item number 4, item 3, sorry. Pursuant to state requirements, the City of Cannon Beach Budget Committee will receive public comment on the City of Cannon Beach proposed budget fiscal year 2022 to 2023.
I'm Siebert Werman, and today I'm speaking for the Cannon Beach Friends of the Trees. They're at PO Box 778, Cannon Beach 97110. Dear Mayor, City Councilors, and Budget Committee members, I come to you today to ask for your help, making sure that we as a community are budgeting enough funds in the coming fiscal year for our Cannon Beach trees. It is our hope that we will be able, with more adequate funding, to plant, protect, and properly care for our trees. With our Tree City USA designation, it's our understanding we've always had at least a few $1,000s budgeted to put toward our community forest. Now, with the recent loss of so many of our trees, last month about this with Community Development Director Jeff Adams, he recommended trying to get more tree funding so that he will be able to use our well-respected city arborist more often in tree decision-making situations regarding the protection of our private trees. With all things considered, we believe that a request for an additional $50,000 is not too much to ask for the increased budget for our city arborist to be consulted on protecting and properly caring for our trees. And please note, it is also our hope that our public trees will also be able to receive a portion of this funding when needed. Thank you for your consideration.
Any other comments?
Well, you might want to ask everybody to raise their hand.
Anyone online? So, number 4, message.
Thank you. I have a question for the Budget Committee. I am sure that you all read this detail. I'm just going to be going through the budget message, and it was a very early part. And looking at the people that are on online, they are the type that are going to study this thing before the meeting. So my question is, do you want the budget message presentation to be kind of the full thing? And the benefit there would be that if somebody ever does decide to look at online and see the recorded meeting, they'll capture, they will have the pleasure of all of my comments, but my comments will actually be less than what's actually written in the budget message. The other side, I can kind of just go through and touch the highlights of some points, and that will save some time. So what I didn't want to do is spend a lot of time repeating what you've already read. And again, I think that, the people that are online are students of this. So I would just like some direction before I get started.
Personally, I read everything. So before a summary.
I think just hitting the highlights, particularly what you particularly think are important.
Okay.
I would also say the highlights, summaries, and the big differences.
Okay. And also, when this is kind of like a summary anyway with the budget message, but each of the department heads will be doing a presentation and they will be going into more detail. So that's why I made this offer. Okay, Rusty, if you would put on. I have a PowerPoint, but it's not like a Jeff PowerPoint.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, the colors don't even match all. This budget includes $700,000 transfer to the general fund reserve and has an ending balance of $2,413,820. The importance of mentioning that is our policy is that we try to put in $400,000 to improve the reserve, and we're going to $700,000 this year. Next 2 points have been, it's a big deal that I can say these next 2 things because it wasn't always true. This budget does not require general fund transfers to the water fund and water reserve fund. It does not require a general fund transfer to the wastewater fund and wastewater reserve fund. It reflects an amount of $481,250 in county TRT collections, and they'll be held in a separate fund. And that is from the tourism portion of the county TRT that they send to the cities where that TLT funds are generated. So that's our portion. We talked last year, and we're going to be talking a little bit more that we're quite a ways into doing our pay-as-you-go strategy for long-term financing. And also we had to increase the consultant professional fees to a total of $120,000. And that is the ongoing legal issues related to having fewer readily buildable lots and also using Crest for regional quality support. Next item, or the, I'm sorry, you're good, trustee. Last year's budget message talked about 4 initiatives recommended to be addressed during that last fiscal year or the current fiscal year. It's water supply resiliency, wastewater system reliability, a resilient city hall police station, and Cannon Beach Elementary School rejuvenation. The water supply resiliency is, we're working for a project that is 15.9 million. It'll be done in 3 phases. Phase 1 is the installation of isolation valves at each of our water tanks. So if there's a seismic event or any other kind of an event where a line would break, right now, all the water will just go ahead and flow out. A seismic valves will detect that and they will shut and all the water in the tank till we take some other measures. Next is to install resilient water lines to replace the current aging water supply lines. They're currently as asbestos concrete down from the springs all the way to where the supply line makes a contact into the city water distribution system. The new type or the new pipe is called HDPE, and it's significantly more resilient during seismic events. It has the ability to flex and has a different joint connection system. Phase 3, which we're getting ready for funding, includes 4 parts. Part 1 is engineering and bid documents for all 4 phases in phase 3, which is 1.382 million. This came about as a relationship issue that Karen and Trevor have established with Business Oregon, where they're now giving us advice. Well, why don't you, instead of doing this $12.2 million project, why don't you just pull out your design so you've got all your information, and then it's a smaller loan for us to deal with, and we can deal with it months and months before you would normally get it. And so that relationship has been excellent, and this is kind of the things that come out of it. The next part is construction of a resilient water main tank to replace the existing, and that's almost $4 million. Part 3 is construction of a resilient water distribution backbone from the water supply to a point north along US 101. That's 3.1 million. And part 4 is continuation of the resilient backbone from a connection point south to the south end tank along 101. These are not random projects. What we're doing is saying, okay, we're going to start at the springs, and we're going to replace everything coming down with HDPE pipe, and it has to go back up, to the tank, and then it comes down, and that accomplishes the first thing, and that's that. When we're talking about resiliency and seismic events or fires or whatever, people can live for a while without food and other things, but they can't live more than 3 days without water. And so we wanted to do everything that we could to at least have one place that people could come to get water. And so that's accomplished with everything up to phase 3 and 4. Phase 3 and 4 then take those lines, and again, it's HDPE pipe, and then sends it north to the tank up at the north end, which is currently supplied with lines that go through the city and everything else, all kinds of places to break. But it will be a completely different resilient line. Same thing going under the Tolovana tank. So we will have a system that is it's enviable in terms of our resiliency and the reliability of our system. And we can do almost anything from there. So if there's a problem on the south end, far south end, we can go ahead and just cut off that end and then just run a line in from the resilient line on 101. So this is a huge accomplishment for the city and a huge contribution to the future of everybody else who have to sit up here. Next was wastewater system reliability. This is one that I know keeps Trevor and Karen up at night. And we are making, pardon?
Stay out of the weeds.
Stay out of the weeds, I know. But and I'm going definitely into the weeds. One of the things that impresses me about the people that we have on our team is that we have shortcomings with some of our pumps, some of our automatic systems, and definitely with our generators. And we have people that when we are having bad weather and we have to move generators, that everybody doesn't have a generator. These folks sleep in the truck next to the lift station in case they've got to do something and that during that kind of weather. Now that to me is a pretty good level of commitment. So we're trying to go ahead and address the issues associated with the reliability. And there's 4 lift stations here. And Karen is telling me to get out of the weeds. That's where she wants to go. So I'll leave with that. But this will take us a long ways in our ability to keep sewage off the beach and out of the street. Seismically resilient City Hall Police Station. Everybody knows we're Cannon Beach. We should be very proud of the strides that we've made regarding emergency situations. But if something truly was to happen, we can't say, well, we'll be good because we'll have this thing taken care of in a couple of hours. If houses are down, the streets are destroyed, water systems, it's years that we have to go ahead and be able to plan and build to be able to get the city back online. So from the first hour, everybody needs the best information they can have. There's got to be a place to report where there's a water line break, where there's somebody injured, where there's a house that's falling down, whatever. That's all got to be tracked. We've got to get it to the right people. And then those people have got to say, all right, that's taken care of, or that was a non-issue. So we take it off the list and then we go to the next priority. So we have to have a place from which we can work in order for that to happen. And it can't be out of our cars. And cell lines and things like that will be down. So last thing is we think it's smart to hedge our bets and construct a well-equipped, resilient location from which to serve the victims of the event. From a funding source, we are using a number of 17.7 million. That number has been updated, but it's only been updated based on the Engineering News Report or the ENR figures from probably, I think it was when it was like 16 million. And we've updated on based on the annual figures that they've given us, and it comes out to 17.7. We don't know if there's going to be other issues related to the Pacific Northwest or whatever until we get into design. But that's the number that we're using. The voters prepared or approved a prepared food tax as the funding source. We anticipate that PFT will generate $880,000 for the city, same number for the fire department, but 880,000. And we estimated the debt service, and that was on 17.7 million. And that was made in March of this year. At that point, it was $720,000 a year. Now, there's 2 things that give me a little bit of comfort with this. One, these numbers tend to go up and not do a whole lot of fluctuation. So we think if anything, the 880,000 will be low. And I'm pretty sure the 720 will be higher. But the idea is that there's a high likelihood that this will be paid entirely by tourists. And we're not going to raise taxes or anything like that for this project based on anything that we know now. The budget implications of this project. We don't plan to go to the bonds, go out for a borrowing until probably April 2023. We need to have a lot of information in order to say this is how much we need in other aspects of the project. So we need to do some work before we get any money from bond funds. So for that reason, we're going to fund design, part of the construction management services, which they're really the ones that are going to be able to give us the timing and constructability, those things. We'll be able to go ahead and get that kind of information, getting ready for the bond borrowing. And the city council has already initiated the process that will allow us to recover and pay back those general funds from bond proceeds by doing what's called a reimbursement resolution. So that allows, instead of just saying, okay, well, this is when you receive the money, you can use it on everything after that. This allows us to look back and say, well, we spent it on this project. We just didn't have the loan yet. So that allows us to go back and recapture those funds. We expect the project to be done in December of 2024. And based on the estimates that were done by Eco Northwest is regarding the PFT collections, it's estimated that 96% of this collection will be funded by tourists. for a fun one. Cannon Beach Elementary School rejuvenation. This is repurposing the school site to become a tourism-related facility based on its ability to host events and meetings, the past history with the Clatsop and Nehalem community, natural beauty of the site, and the attractiveness of the location. The project budget has been estimated to be 5.5 million. We didn't want to risk, because there's so many assumptions in there. Like, if everything's not as bad as we think it might be, we had the potential to over borrow, and we would have had to repay debt service with real dollars. So we made a decision to only borrow 4.6 million at this point. And then by the time we get to April of 2023, we will know if we need more funds. And the decision was made that if we needed more than the 4.6, that we would be able to add it to the City Hall borrowing. To give you an idea of where we are financially on that, approximately 850,000 has or will be spent on roof replacement, seismic upgrades in the roofs, and contaminant removal, primarily asbestos. A contract has been signed with the architectural firm CETA, and they will be using this room tonight and for the next information collection. But they can only give us a phase one cost because nobody knows what we're going to build yet. And so we need to get at least their schematic design before they can say, okay, now we know how many hours this is going to take and who we need to involve. So, but the first phase is 650,000. So there's two numbers we're working from, 4.6 million. If you take those dollars off, it leaves about 3.1 million available from the 4.6 and about 4 million from the 5.5. I'm saying these estimates cannot be or could not be made all inclusive at this point because we don't have the number for the phase two. We don't have the number for phase one or phase two for a construction manager. We're just saying that at this point, we have that much funds to be able to go ahead and work with. So those are the numbers. Cannon Beach Elementary funding will be from TLT. We generally get reliably, I would say, is about $480,000 from the 70%. Yeah, from the 70% of the 1% TLT that the county's collecting. And so that would bring us 480,000. The debt service payment for 4.6 million, which we've already received those funds, is approximately 245,000. So we think that we are going to be safe with the 480 from the TLT from the county to be able to go ahead and make that debt service payment. And again, this is a source from tourists. And we also have a reimbursement resolution in place to allow for the reimbursement of the general fund costs as we have for City Hall. Not really budget related, but had an outreach meeting on, I think it was the 7th, but it was Saturday on site. That was very successful. Our second meeting is today at 6, right where we're sitting. And we anticipate that this project will be done in December of 23. Union negotiations, we had signed contracts. We have signed contracts. And we were negotiating this time last year, or probably further back. No one saw the conditions that we'd be dealing with economically now. And so the COLA was agreed to at 2% for both groups. And council last night at their May 10th meeting, and they approved memorandums of understanding with both groups. And this budget that you'll be looking at was built based on a 5% increase for the COLA to try to make sure that we don't have our people falling behind in terms of pay. And recommended staff additions, we're talking about an additional staff member in Public Works Administration. Karen has said I'm not allowed to say any more than that. We shouldn't even react to that, okay. And then also an additional police officer, which Jason will talk about when we have our next meeting. And that is it, unless anybody has any questions for my presentation. Any questions from anybody?
I saw on Facebook, Nancy had mentioned that you're going out
I didn't say, that was the. no, it's the-
Yeah, that's Kelsey's position.
It exists today. It's not an additional. It's just to fill that. She took a job with Northwest Natural Gas.
I think they're talking about Lori's position.
I think, yeah, she's talking about the administrative position for Lori.
Yeah,
Juana, the one
yeah.
Juana left.
Yeah, no,
Right.
one is
Yeah,
left.
that's a vacancy that we will fill.
and I just saw that today in Facebook.
Yeah, I forwarded it from
Yeah.
another
Okay.
Facebook.
Yeah, and we received the notice early this week.
Monday.
Okay, so is that one listed also?
I don't think you advertised yet, have you?
I'm advertising on Thursday in the Daily Astorian.
Yeah.
And it's on our website right now.
Okay.
We've received one application so far.
Next item is number 5, General Fund Public Works Department.
I feel like saying good morning since we were here so late last night. That pizza's good, by the way, cold, just left over, so there's still some in the fridge. You guys want a snack?
You did after this meeting, huh?
If I was as great as my brother Jeff with the PowerPoints, I would do this on PowerPoint and I would have a little music in the background to the tune of Janet Jackson, what he did done for me lately. Because I like to start off each year by thanking the council and the budget committee for the money that you gave us. And I like to show you how we spent, especially the capital projects and some of the larger operating projects. So if that's good with you, I'm going to tee us up here. On display here, I did some picture boards that we'll be using next week during the Public Works Week celebration. You guys are welcome to come in and join us. The Public Works Committee, as they do each year, organizes a luncheon for my team, and we extend that invite to you guys and to the city staff. We're not allowed to serve food to the public, but they're welcome to come and mingle and talk. But the luncheon is actually for staff and council. So if you guys would like to come Tuesday at noon, mark your calendars. The Public Works Committee will be on a tour of our water and wastewater plants. And so when they get done, they will come back and we'll kick the luncheon off. So the picture boards will be used next week, but they're also to highlight some of our projects. So I'm going to start off with the water team. And the project that you funded for them was the meter module project. And despite the supply chain delays that the nation experienced, this team pushed forward and they were able to get this project completed. They are just installing the last meter module at the Hallmark, which is a complex meter, and that will complete this project. They installed 1,821 meter modules, and we currently have about a 34% customer sign up at 617 Ion Water accounts. And that's just with the water team working as they change out the meter modules. If people are home, they're going ahead and taking that time to leave a how-to list, a cheat, if you will, of how they get signed up. If they need help with it, they're taking the time to get them signed up while they're out there in the field. This project has allowed our team to touch every single meter. And as you know, we do meters by drive-by handheld and it automatically uploads. So it's been years since the water team has actually gone back and touched every meter for just the general maintenance, looked at it, vegetation control, just checking everything. So this project enabled to do that. And if you recall, we compared bidding this project out versus doing it in-house. And Daniel and Sean and Daryl came and talked to you guys and told you about the benefits of doing it in-house. One of the things that allowed them to touch every single meter. And they also estimated that they could do it for half the amount of money that this project was budgeted for. And if you recall, we have a low interest rate loan through Business Oregon in the amount of $624,000. And we can do a drawdown on any amount of that money. We don't have to take the full amount. If the project underruns that, then we don't take the full amount. But it's at a 1%, 30-year term, 50% principal forgiveness. That means we pay back half of whatever we draw down. That's the next best thing to grant money that we don't have to pay back. So this team estimated that they could do this project in-house for $325,000. Currently, we haven't booked the last few expenditures for Hallmark, but we're trending to underrun that amount of money. That's due to this team and how hard they worked on this project. So as of the March actuals, which I have here with me, we're on target to underrun that $325,000 commitment. I think that's an outstanding achievement by this water team. The water team also worked with us. You've heard a lot about this. Bruce got stole a little bit of my thunder. You've heard about this for 3.5 years now. With Bruce and the Public Works team and an engineering team that we brought on to try to assist us in developing this plan. We had a vision, but we needed an engineering team to really put that together for us. We'll bring it to you and talk about what this multi-year, multi-phase project would look like. And if you remember, it's 3 phases. The one adds the seismic valves to each of the water tanks, and it makes the site improvement up by the concrete tank that we know will not withstand a seismic event. So if that were to fail, we were at risk of our public works yard being damaged, where our satellite EOC is located if this building is not standing, and our Red Cross location, which is Coaster, just directly across the street, and obviously the surrounding houses. So we're going to make some site improvements that will mitigate and direct that water when and if that tank fails, prior to us getting it rebuilt. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 replaces the water lines, as Bruce said, between the springs to the treatment plant, back to the tank and down to the designated distribution area where water can be distributed to the community within that 72-hour timeframe that we're shooting for. Okay. The final phase 3 replaces the existing concrete tank with a new tank that meets all the seismic requirements, as well as installing the backbone distribution lines along Highway 101 to the north and to the south, creating a looped system in our water system. So if we have a failure outside of a seismic event, if we have a failure, we can isolate with isolation valves that are going to be installed during that time, smaller neighborhood pods where not so many people are affected like they are now. We had the Whale Park water main break that affected a lot of people. We don't have enough isolation valves to narrow down and minimize the number of people that are impacted when we have a failure like that. So this part of phase 3 will address that, and it loops the entire system. As Bruce said, we're going to be using HDPE pipe, which is high density polyethylene type pipe, and it's proven to be earthquake resilient. Funding that supports this, we've already secured and been awarded funding for phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is $586,000, 1% interest, 30-year term, 50% principal forgiveness. Phase 2, $3.2 million, 1% interest, 30-year term, up to $500,000 in principal forgiveness. So at $3.2 million, we don't get that 50% principal forgiveness, but we get up to $500,000. That's in our hands now. We can do a drawdown anytime we're ready. Phase 1, the RFP is out on the advertising market right now. We'll be awarding that, doing a bid opening on the 19th of May. Phase 2 will be going out right after that. Phase 3, the funding, our letter of intent is in Business Oregon's hands, and they're evaluating it to meet with us and tell us the best funding options that we have for phase 3. That price tag is $12.1 million. And what they've asked us to do is break down phase 3 in smaller chunks, because the 1% interest that we've had, the opportunity to seize up to this point, is not going to be available. So what they've told us is there may be some higher interest rate loans, but your principal forgiveness may be better. So we may have a wash here, and we're trying to hammer that out with them as we speak. So the total price tag for all three phases of this is 15.8 million. And as you hear, there's a lot of projects behind this. Lastly, for the water team, we had the water line breakdown at Well Park, obviously unplanned. The failure occurred December 18th. We lost approximately 160,000 gallons of water. It was a defective 12-inch Simpson PVC pipe. And if you recall, we've described that pipe to you as being like China. It shatters, just self-combusts. Daniel tells me that it was installed back in 1978 for the Breakers Point build. And he said they knew right out of the gate that it was bad pipe. It failed the first time in 1979. And it's failed 9 times since 1979. So in various spots, not all at Well Park. But that's what we're dealing with. That's in ground all throughout this community. It destroyed a large part of Well Park, as you guys can see, but Trevor's done a great job getting the stairs scheduled for replacement before this budget cutoff. So before June 30th, he tells me that it's going to be done, and I have all the faith in the world that he's going to do it. So the stairs will look just like they were before. They'll match the planters just like they were before. That's been kind of the delay besides weather, is that we had to be able to get the concrete stain that matches those planters, and it's the exposed aggregate. So it was a little bit of a trick trying to get that nailed down. So that's the high level accomplishments of the water team. Wastewater, as Bruce mentions, they've had their hands full managing failed generators. I'll get into that in a minute. But they did the Haystack pump station upgrades. This was a master plan project. They replaced 100 feet of force main line, installed new pumps, replaced all the check valves, and upgraded the control panel inside the pump station. This was funded by utility rate revenue. Project completed on time, December 21st. The weather was horrid. And we are trending to come in under budget. We're waiting for the contractor to give us the final invoices, but it looks like we're going to underrun that project too. Now they're in the process of tackling Matanuska Pump Station, another master plan project. This project replaces the old problematic natural gas generator with a new diesel generator similar to the rest of the fleet of generators that the city already owns. And as you might recall, over the last 5 years that I've been here, the wastewater team, Trevor and I have been working hard to somewhat standardize our pump stations so that when we get new staff in, like Marty and Levi, they're not dealing with a myriad of different generators, a myriad of different control panels. And when we have failures, they're trying to remember what they're supposed to be doing at the different pump stations. We have 9 different pump stations. And it's a mismatch of all different types of technology because we've just chumped away at it as the budget could allow because we didn't have these loans. And so it was a little slow on the uptake trying to get things brought up to speed and standardized. So we've made great strides here. The other part of Matanuska is to build a cover over the entire pump station, preserving the assets that currently sit outside exposed to the coastal elements. Many of these assets were replaced just before or following the July 20th overflow. We replaced the big transformer out there. That's a stainless steel transformer. It is very expensive and it is sat outside in the elements until we could get this cover over it. When the overflow happened, we did a bunch of improvements during that time, but all that is sitting outside in the elements. So this cover will protect that. We took the architectural design to DRB prior to advertising the RFP, and the bid was awarded, and they're in the middle of it right now. We tried to pursue the FEMA grant to cover the generator, and we were ultimately denied for that. So the generator was covered with utility revenue that took care of the generator and the associated electrical work when we change out the old natural gas to the new diesel that has to happen within the electronic room. The cover funding was Business Oregon loan, again, 1% interest, 30-year term, 50% principal forgiveness. The total of that loan is 300,000. And as I say, that's under construction right now. Lastly, the generator upgrades. As I mentioned, the guys had their hands full trying to manage the generators failing on us this year. It just seemed like it was happening all at once. We found ourselves in quite a, I say catastrophic situation because we were having a hard time even getting rental generators as our backup because the backups we had were failed. And then the permanent generator at 2 of our locations were failing. Maine was completely down. We have a rental out there right now. The company's called me multiple times asking when we're going to be able to give it up. They need it for other customers. So it's that kind of a situation. So you allowed me to take 30,000 out of my approved budget to be able to cover that purchase, and that main generator's been ordered. The Ecola pump station also, it was an old military generator. This was a used generator back when we purchased it. Now we've gotten a good life out of it, but it can no longer be repaired or promised to sustain itself. The Peterson Cat that comes out and does our generator maintenance said it's done, it's past its life cycle. We'll patch it along, but we can't guarantee anything. And so again, I came to you and asked you to be able to use some of my approved budget to be able to replace that. These 2 generators were part of the Matanuska generator request that I sent to FEMA. We had 4 generators on the list to be purchased through the FEMA grant, all of which were denied. The delay between the time we originally asked for the generator, which was December 2020, it took over a year for FEMA to review the application. It went back and forth several times. We modified it to please their request, and they still denied it. Just in the difference of that time frame, the generator was originally estimated at 50,000 when we sent the application in. When they denied it and I came to you with the failed generator, the new quote was $75,000 because of the supply chain issues that were going on. So it's great to pursue grants, but we also have to ask ourselves when we're in that kind of a situation, it's almost better to just pull the trigger on the funding and chase the grant for things that we can afford the delay in time, because these loan applications and the FEMA applications are very time consuming. That just got ordered. It has a 38-week lead time because it's a custom build. All these pump stations are different, so they actually custom build these generators. And recognizing the current supply chain issues, the generator company wouldn't give us any more than 38-week lead time. So shy of me strapping myself to that temporary generator out there when they try to come take it away, we're running on temporary power. And then the last 2 locations that I'll be talking to you about shortly is going to be Midway and Siuslaw. We currently roll mobile generators out there. It's a master plan project that we wanted to put permanent generators in there. Those were the other 2 on the FEMA application that was denied. Next up is the roads team. This team was busy this year. They did the 7th and Oak improvements that you see in the pictures there. They worked with an engineering firm and OPRD to propose a plan for improving the existing 7th and Oak Street outfall system. OPRD did not like what was burping out on the beach, and they wanted us to improve that. We were ultimately able to come up with a design that created a more extensive ground filtration process, resulting in a reduced output. There's really nothing that burps out of that pipe unless we have some torrential downfalls. You'll see something coming out, but not to the magnitude we ever saw before. OPRD liked this design. They signed off on that, even though we were able to do this all within our vegetation line. It was not in their jurisdiction, but we worked with them to be able to get them comfortable with the design and comfortable with the fact that we would reduce what was burped out on the beach. That budget was $55,000, and we underran that budget by $8,000. This model, by the way, is what's being proposed for the presidential streets that OPRD is also unhappy about. So I'll talk to you about that in the budget, but they were a fan of what we did up there. Next up is Warren Way intersection improvement. We extended the landscaping to enable the replacement of the temporary candlesticks that were out there for 5 years. And we added sidewalks and ADA curbs on the west side of the street. They already existed on the east side. And we upgraded the current two-way stop to a four-way stop, creating a much improved pedestrian crossings. The funding for this was a $100,000 ODOT grant, $38,000 of the city's general funds. We're currently trending to underrun this project. We're waiting for the final invoices to book from the contractor. Lastly is Larch Street infrastructure improvements and paving. This was a team effort between roads and wastewater. Wastewater was in the middle of the pump station construction. So they leaned on roads to be able to replace 3 sewer bellies that we had on the line out there. So they told Paul how they wanted it done. Paul got the contractor, he oversaw it, project managed it, the contractor made the repairs. We also made some storm drain improvements. Larch is a pretty steep street. Up at the top, we didn't have enough catch basins to kind of catch some of that water. Rest of it flowed down and we had multiple catch basins down the street. So they added a couple of catch basins and then we did an overlay on that street and it looks fantastic. Trevor did a phenomenal job getting with all the businesses, and there's multiple rentals over there as well as hotels that everybody know ahead of time. We didn't have one single complaint. I was out there with them the day they were paving. The guys did a really good job working with the paving contractor, and ultimately several of the hotels sent us some really nice emails saying, job well done. That completed in April of 22, and it was within the allotted sewer, storm, and pavement preservation budgets that you authorized this year. Next up is Parks and Recycle Team. We had to improve the park shed where Kirk and Joe keep all of their parks mowing and tools and all that type of equipment. That shed originally belonged to the conference center, and we inherited that. And so it needed a roof and cedar siding. The budget for that was $28,000. That's currently being completed this week. Tree City USA Parks Committee works to ensure that we back plant any trees that come out of our right of way, even if it's not in the same location. We try to do a 1-for-1 or at least a 2-for-1 replacement somewhere else in town. And that ensures that we keep our Tree City USA standing every year. We usually do a celebration during Arbor Day with the kids, and Kirk and Joe and them go out and do tree plantings, and then also through the 12 Days of Earth, working with the Parks Committee. They did a second Purple Martin birdhouse this year. So we're starting to develop a little bit of a condo complex out there where it seems to be working really well. They helped with the Nakus Park dedication, working with the Parks Committee and the tribes to do dedication at the park. They are in the middle of the Sitka and Oak Beach access stairs. These are the last 2 failing staircases we had going down to the beach. They completed Sitka August of 21, and Oak Street is scheduled for completion before the June 30th budget cutoff this year. You'll see in the budget book that we've carried it over. We did it kind of as a safety net in case we had the issue with the lumber supply chain delays. Our shed completion was supposed to be last week and it ended up being this week because we were short on cedar shingles and we had to wait a week to get more of them. It's just supply chain stuff that we've been dealing with. Staircases, $65,000. We anticipate underrunning that significantly. So that's some of the key highlights. In closing, again, I just want to say thank you for the budget that you give us each year and trusting us to spend that money as efficiently as we possibly can. If you haven't done so already, please take a look at boards that we have up here. the wastewater team brought us some props, but I would ask you not to handle those. They came straight out of the sewer system. One is a 8-inch sewer line that is just completely compacted with tree roots. Opportunity to see just how damaging that could be to our system and why we harp about not putting trees in the right of way. They tried to bring us the least smelly, messy items they could. All these projects were developed, vetted, designed for cost and designed for execution, managed while the team was managing their normal daily loads and duties, their normal daily jobs. I will say that this year, we definitely recognized the maximum threshold of work volume and burnout. I pushed the team hard because I truly felt in my heart of hearts that we could tee all of this up and be able to do the water resiliency plan and get it ready for you guys, pursue the funding. But I realized that I pushed these guys really hard. This was our top that we could do, and it's just not sustainable. And this is why we're asking for the additional body. The $15.8 million come with a lot of projects, and it spans over the next 5 to 8 years. This is not a short-term thing. This is not a seasonal employee. And the amount of reporting that the feds require with all these loans is significant. And we cannot do it with our current staffing level. Let's see. I know that council's asked me a few times if we needed additional staffing help. I'll reflect back on the Matanuska overflow. And if you go back to that meeting, Robin said, Karen, do you feel that you need some staffing help, increased staffing? And if you watch the video, I smiled at you and I said, is this a loaded question? Because there's a side of me that said, I want to say, hell yes, you know. The other side of me said, it's an anomaly. It's going to happen. It happens in a spurt. We have to be able to react to that and address the system and the situation, and then life goes on. It wasn't a staffing issue. It was a functional issue at our pump station. And so, you know, I really didn't feel I needed staffing help. When we were doing the water resiliency and we were talking about all the loans and everything, I think it was Mike that brought up, are you guys going to need some staffing? At that time, I really didn't think we would. I just didn't know how much of this we'd be able to pull off, how many loans we could secure to actually execute this within a time frame that we had envisioned. And as the money came, I kept telling Trevor, we're in trouble. Because I don't know if we can manage all this. So this is why we're asking for the help. So questions on anything that I've talked about, what we've done for you this year? All right, I will dive into the budget for this year of what I'll be asking you for. Let's start on page 34. Well, and if it's okay, I respect the fact that you've got a new budget member, but I think like Bruce said, you guys are pretty savvy with the budget. So if it's all right, I'll use the same format I did last year. I'll tackle each category and I'll tell you the areas where I'm making changes and why I'm making the changes. If there's something else within that category that you have a question about, feel free to ask me, but I'm not going to take you line item by line item. Okay. So for page 34, this is our Public Works Ecola Forest Reserve Southwind Stewardship. To Jan's comment about the dollars that we have dedicated for that, you will see an increase on our operating materials and supplies. We already have $1,000 in there, but we bumped that up. And that is for things that we want to do in the Forest Reserve Parks Committee, and the stewardship folks give us their request and we combine that with what we would like to see done. That can be anything from the Scotch broom management to trees or whatever the team collectively decides that we want to do there. So that's the only change that we made on that page. Next, I'll take it to page 35, which is parks in that same category. You will see collectively across all of my teams, an increase in fuel and an increase in materials and supplies. And this is something that I've just been tracking over this past year because of the supply chain issues. And I was trying to determine what is the percentage that I needed to increase to recognize this. It doesn't appear to be a short-term issue. Hopefully it is, and if so, obviously we'll underrun this. But I did not want to have to come to you and ask to pull money from my contingency because I shortchanged myself. I will say that I have seen some incredible spikes, one being the cedar siding, the other being steel, aluminum, any kind of metals. We're seeing sometimes 3 times what we've paid in the past year for things. Other things, we see dips, just plywood and straight lumber, signposts, things like that. You'll see a dip, and you'll see a spike up and a dip. So I started trending this. I pulled out the extreme anomalies and I took an average. And that's what I've shown in here is the increase. Fuel, I did a little bit differently because I think that after summer, we're going to see a drop in fuel. I don't think that this is going to be a real long-term thing. I hope I'm right. So I took a little bit more conservative approach on that. I did a 20% fuel increase. It's much higher than that right now. But like I say, I think that it'll come down. The analysts are saying it's going to come down after the summer. We'll see. We see a seasonal dip and drop anyway, but really oil is going to be what dictates that. So you'll see that across all my departments because they all drive vehicles. We have diesel generator fuel that we have to constantly supply. So I increased both of those categories. So in parks, that's where you're going to see the increase. Fuel, the materials and supplies that I spoke to. And then again, to Jan's concern, community forestry, we upped that. And we also upped our arborist, the contractual services, where Jeff can review all tree issues. And then you'll see the new roof and siding down on count number 62901. Again, we put that in there in case we were not able to get that siding to finish it and it ran over the June 30th. I expect that to be done this week. And so I'll simply tell Lori I'm not going to be using that money. In fact, if you were to approve my head count, she would have to redo my budget and she could go ahead and take that out. So just putting that out there for food for thought. Next up, page 36, are parking. Increased operating materials and supply, and that's just basically for any trees, plants, and fertilizer that we use in that parking lot over there to maintain it. That would be the only change I would see. And I'll remind you that the last couple of years, especially when COVID happened, Bruce asked me to take my operating budget down to a just keep the lights on type of a budget. We really scaled it back. And what that included is to keep things healthy and don't neglect the maintenance of our system, but don't do anything extra. So we really peeled everything back. I've challenged the team to just see how we can hold that and really put our focus on our master plan projects and the larger capital projects that I asked for a give. So this is what you're going to see here. I haven't, the things that I'm highlighting that we're increasing is the only adjustments we've made since that COVID scale back budget. And I think we've driven a lot of efficiency in our team by doing that. It really made them rethink what they're doing and what they're spending it on. And that all of them have done a great job. They all have budget responsibility, even Andrew and Recycle. So in parking, that is the only thing that you see increase there. 37 restrooms, let's talk about that a little bit. When you guys gave us the money to change out the fixtures, you gave me the money to do the Second Street bathrooms and Les Street bathrooms. When you did that, I committed to you that I could reduce our maintenance costs by half. I felt very comfortable committing that. I even gave myself a margin in there but I could be wrong possibly. But we were pretty certain after talking to Parks, most of them have the stainless steel fixtures, and they talked to me about how much that saved them in maintenance costs. Because just like the Simpson pipe out in the ground, our toilet bowls that were ceramic and like in Midtown, when someone jams that full of sand or rocks or anything that they're rinsing off and they clog up the toilet, it cracks that bowl. So the whole fixture had to be replaced. They can't just repair the toilet. And so the maintenance costs were very exorbitant. People go in, they kick the handles off of the sinks, they're busting the faucets off of the handles that they flush the toilets with. So it's just mischievous misuse, and some of it's kids, honestly, some of it's adults rinsing their kids off in the urinals like a sink. And it just is really hard on our system. But since we have changed those other 2 bathrooms out, that has proven itself, and we have underrun the commitment that we've given you year to date. So I think that if you were to afford me the Midtown rebuild that I'm asking for, and remember, I brought the plan to DRB and got their approval, and I brought it to you and got your approval. So it's ready to be engineered and constructed. That is one of Kurt's wish lists before he retires, is to see that Midtown bathroom rebuilt so that we don't have to have porta potties out front. We stopped it when COVID happened and our visitors were reduced. But prior to that, we actually had to pay because we had so much damage to 2 of those porta potties that the company billed us for that. So the vandalism is significant. And by redoing that bathroom, changing out the fixtures and increasing the number of fixtures we have, we killed 2 birds with 1 stone. We reduce the maintenance and we eliminate the rental of the unsightly porta potties. So that is an ask that I'm asking this year for you guys. I think that should come out of that TLT funding. I think Ashley has supported that it qualifies for that. So that would be my desire to see that paid through that source if you're comfortable with that. I will call that a shovel-ready project. So see in some of these categories, not all of them, but the ones that we have to do pre-engineering to have a project shovel-ready, or to be able to vet some of the master plan projects, because the master plan was put together in 2015 and ultimately approved and adopted in 2017. A lot of those conditions and prices have changed. And so we vet those projects to say, have the conditions changed from the time that master plan was put together? Has there been something changed enough that we have a better improved idea on how we want to go after this? And what has the cost impact been since that project was originally estimated? And because when they estimated it, they didn't engineer it. They just gave a high level estimation of what industry cost was for doing a project similar to that. Now we have to pre-engineer it and get it ready to be constructed. And so I've increased my engineering budget for those type of projects. There's a difference between CIP engineering, which is a master plan project, and then non-CIP engineering. The Midtown bathroom would be an example of a non-CIP. It was a desire, but it wasn't a master plan project. And so the actual master plan project was the bathroom down by the haystack stairs. And so the greater need is really met. So that's why I have 2 separate engineering categories. The non-CIP is also when Bruce comes and says, feds are going to be releasing more money, have 6 shovel-ready projects ready to go for me. I got to get those engineered. So I know exactly what that's going to cost us. And it's ready to put out to bid if we get federal dollars. They want us to react quick. And so we have to tee some of those projects up. And I have to have engineering money to do that.
So why are we adding the utilities now to public restrooms?
Adding utilities.
The 2 lines that say utilities, electricity, and utilities, water and sewer are new line item, I guess. because they have not been accounted for in previous years.
Karen, why are we paying for water is what the question is.
You mean on the SDC?
No.
Page 37.
restrooms.
Page 37.
Part of the Public Works Committees. Karen,
Mhm.
we're billing you for water and sewer now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That was-
you're talking about when Carolyn was here and we did the utility rate review, and she suggested that we start paying for our own water during that time. We weren't billing ourselves for water. And she felt that that's something we should do, so we know exactly what the public bathrooms are costing the city. Sorry, I was lost on
All
that.
right.
And don't worry, she's keeping track of me to make sure I got all this.
I had a question too. It says, public, you said that public restroom maintenance was a lot less expensive, but you've got a proposal here for $8,000 more than was approved last year.
There's a difference between maintenance and supplies. In that category is all the toilet papers and, paper towels, gloves, trash can liners, all that kind of stuff. Bruce did the same thing. He said, "You're not meeting your objective." I said, "Oh, yes, I am."
But the supplies are $5,000 more as well. So you've really got an increase of about what, 23,000 or yeah,
Those
23,000.
increases are for J. Paul's crew to clean and service the bathrooms, and the other are the supplies.
Okay.
So those are separate from maintenance. Maintenance, to me, is when I got to call a plumber to fix something that's broken. And that includes an electrician because we have the hand dryers in there, right? And so I have to call Cannon Beach Electric when one of those hand dryers is damaged. You have to push button. Some people kick them with their feet or instead of their hands, or they punch them really hard with their hands, and it causes that button to break. Electric has to come and get that repaired. Trevor's done a really good job of making Wes into a bathroom maintenance man to the best of his ability until we have to call Mayday and then call Cannon Beach Electric or a plumber. Some basic stuff we can do. Sometimes the guys can unclog the bathroom. Wes is our guy. But then when we have to call the big guns, that's maintenance. Okay, I don't count maintenance as the toilet paper and all that. We've really seen a spike in that. This year and last year, our supplier was having a hard time just keeping us supplied with products. And when things begin to open back up, or people could leave their houses and we got our big influx of people, we got the people plus some. And so our bathrooms were really getting use. They made up for that lost time when we were locked down.
I just want to touch on something with the Midtown restroom rebuild and the proposal to build out a TLT. We don't have a place right now where we have $250,000 left over in TLT to go to that. What we do have is the ability when we get to financing City Hall, that we could get the $250,000 out of that and then use TLT to pay the debt service. And we're paying $245,000 on 4.6 million, and I can't do this math quickly in my head, but it would be a percentage of the 245,000 to get to the 4.6 to get it down to 250,000. So it would be a relatively low amount. It would allow us to build it without, say, taking funds from TAC or something like that, where some of the other funds are the chamber, something like that. So there is a way, I don't have a way to go ahead and touch $50,000, I don't think, but we have a way to get $250,000, and it would be the spring of next year. And it would just be a payment throughout that time.
I'll give you some real numbers on maintenance. In 2015 or 2017 to 2018 budget year, we were in about the 15,000 percentile expenditure for maintenance. That's plumbing and electric. 2018 to 2019, that jumped up to 18,000. We were having to do a lot of repairs. The year the fixtures were replaced was during our 1920 budget year. We begin to see the drop. We made the replacements later in the season, so we didn't get to see that whole year. We dropped it down to 13 grand. And the following years where we saw the real drop. We only spent $8,600. That's less than half of the 18 that we started out, 18,000. Okay. And on right now, we're trending to be right on par with what we did last year, so far this year. So seeing what the summer brings, really the majority of this, when you peel it down even further, where you're seeing the majority of the repairs are Midtown. And so you keep peeling the onion back because we track everything where, when we call the plumber out, he says what location we had him doing a repair. So I can track what's happening at Les Shirley, what's happening at Second Street, what's happening at Midtown. So that's where I've been able to see where my costs are going. All right. Next up, let's go page 45. Total forest reserve fund, no changes there. Parks SDC. For us to start charging for the parks projects that we do. And again, I'll remind you that when the consultant was here, we went through the master plan. Kirk went through the entire plan with me along with Barb, and they told me what was factual that they felt was going to go forward, or they wanted to go forward. And some of the projects were originally identified, they knew that they scrapped it a long time ago. I said, tell me the ones that you really want to see move forward, because that's what I'll give to the consultant for them to do the numbers and tell me, do these projects even qualify to collect SDCs on? And so that's what this account is for. Lori tells me we won't recognize or realize those SDCs until August of 22. The old rate stays in effect until then. So August 22 is when that starts going in place. Is that right, Lori? Did I say that?
Yeah, August 1st.
August of 22, June of 23 is where we'll see those SDCs start building up. So when we pull the trigger on those projects, I mean, we'll go towards that. All right, page 74 is our recycling fund. We'll say that despite this being a category that's really tough for us to manage, I mean, it's a service that the city has decided they want to provide to the community. And I think we should. I think it's a good thing that we're doing, but we're very challenged with how we manage some of the costs. Categories that I've had to increase this year because we've already been notified that the entity that is supporting these things, like the folks that come and pick up our yard waste and whatnot, they've advised us of increases. So you'll see an increase in the yard waste program. You'll see the fuel that I spoke to you about earlier, materials and supplies I spoke to you about earlier. And then the facility maintenance, we have a door out there that's the big sliding door that the rails are broken on it. We have to get it fixed. It's an OSHA safety issue. Other than that, there's no changes that we're making increase wise. You'll see some reductions in some of the categories like computer needs and stuff like that. We reduced it. They have the computer that serves them. We don't need to keep the dollars as high as they were, so we reduced those. Any questions on recycling? On the page 76, the reserve fund for recycling, no change there. All right, let's go to page 79, the water fund. again, I'll point out a couple of reductions just for kicks and grins. We reduced the computer expenses because when we relocated the water team out to the wastewater plant where they had a little bit more space and elbow room, they got desktop computers at that time. So there should be no further need for us to do any computers. So we dropped that down. The increase that you'll see is the meter module service. That's the software that is the Ion Water that all the customers have access to. That software is what enables people to not only be cognizant of their usage to support the expectation of conservation, but it also tells the customer if they have a leak, water that's running in a 24-hour period nonstop, we'll send them an alert and they set it up. It can either come to their phone, it can, their text, or it can go to their email. And so I would think that all of you guys have Ion Water accounts. If you don't, we can help you get set up. All the committee members signed up for Ion Water. So now that that project is done, the next step for us will be to do kind of a media blast. We're going to do in the newspaper, our bulletin. Kelsey was going to be the one kind of coordinating that. So we're going to delay it for a month. But Daniel, Sean, and Daryl will come in and we will have a time here where we invite the public in. If they need help getting set up, they'll sit with each of the guys. They'll get accounts set up for them, show them how to use it, and then turn them loose. We'll also have a phone number, like a help desk, that they can call in if they're doing it from home. They want to Zoom in instead of showing up here at City Hall. If they're second homeowners, we'll be able to walk them through it on the phone. We're doing that now for people that got the cheat sheet that Daryl leaves behind, and they'll call in and ask questions. We'll get them set up. So we'll do another big push. Our goal is to get to 50% take rate. Hermiston has the same modules. They've only been able to realize a 5% take rate in their customers. So the guys have done great. They're at almost 35%.
That's great.
Attention towards 50%. So we realize that not everybody's going to be set up for it. I always use myself an example. If it's not simple, it loses my attention pretty quick. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. So they've been pretty successful getting everybody set up.
It works really well.
Yeah, I think it does
I
too.
personally haven't
Friend.
set it up yet, and I'm very much looking forward to what you just spoke about, but
Yeah.
a customer of mine has it, and it detected a very weird leak.
Mhm.
It's underground in the water line that I'd spent a lot of time trying to find.
Isolate, yeah.
And ultimately, it's what let me know that it was happening.
Yeah. And we get a lot of calls from folks, I won't say me, Daryl, gets calls from folks saying, it's nice that I can see this real time now, and it's not a 30-day billing cycle to see the little red line on my bill that says you're in a leak status, And so you will see the Public Works Committee come forward to you with me saying, we're going to modify the ordinance again to support Jan's recommendation that when we do this, when we make this capital investment as a city, we need to set a new expectation that the customers have ownership of not only monitoring their usage, and this goes along with Carolyn looking at the rates, and we adjusted that base rate to give everybody that 400 cubic feet, is be cognizant of your usage. And even my brother said this month, now our water bill went up. I said, well, what's your usage? Are you blowing past 400 cubic feet because you had the kids and the grandkids up? And you go, oh yeah. Are you on Ion Water? Look it up, And so the ownership has to be on the customer of saying, how much am I using? And when I get a leak, get it fixed. Don't let it run for a month or 2 months before you address it. Second homeowners, well, when I get out there, no, they have property management people. Somebody's taking care of their yard. They can call it to me. And so we set that expectation, and the Public Works Committee worked really hard to go through the ordinance and kind of benchmark us against other municipalities that have these meter modules and see what their ordinance says. What was the expectation that they set to the customers to own some of this in the spirit of water conservation? A lot of people say, well, we're never going to run out of water because our springs are the springs. They're there forever. Maybe not. So Anyway, Jan gave us a good push on that, and the committee's really stepped up and done a good job. So in June, you'll be seeing the proposal for the ordinance on that. So that's what that monthly software fee is. Of course, fuel, and then again, the maintenance, equipment and maintenance. On account number 62422, here in maintenance, that's for a pump that we want to replace at the Sunset Pump Station. And our turbidity chlorine monitor is not operating properly, and Daniel's asked to be able to replace that. That's about a $3,500 unit. And the pump is $4,000, so that's what the increase is there. Materials and supply, that's our marketing trends. You see, and you'll see the engineering fee, 62540. That's the fees that I'm talking about right there. That's a non-master plan project. Okay, so for our water resiliency, that wasn't originally a master plan. That was a plan we had to develop on how to get this town ready. And so it wasn't a capital, but I had to vet some of those projects. I had to pay Windsor Engineering to tell me what funding am I chasing? What dollar amount am I asking for these loans? So that's what that type of money is for. Any questions on the water page? You guys want to take a health break before I get into the next page?
Question,
Sure.
when you have the restricted fund balance at the very top, Karen,
Uh-huh.
is that the carryover from the previous year, I'm assuming?
Yes, yes, it is, Brandon.
Okay, so that, so down below it with the water charges reflects 0% increase, and then water charges reflects 15% increase.
Yeah, so if we didn't raise rates at all, it would raise 1.436 million. With a 15% increase, we'll raise an additional $209,400, which will cover all of the expenses in this fund that you see.
Okay, that's fine. I understand that. Is there any other money coming in from anywhere else for the water fund?
Yeah, we have loan proceeds, which Karen touched on for the projects that she has.
Sorry,
And our SDC revenue,
okay,
and our SDC revenue.
okay.
No, SDCs are separate fund.
Okay.
It used to
But
be
that's
in here.
still water, right? We'll still have.
Yeah, it's still you, yeah,
That would go towards some of these projects.
whatever the allowable projects are for SDCs.
Okay. Good.
Yes.
Okay. You guys want a health break?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, page 80, I failed to mention something on the water fund. Item in there for a new fleet truck. That's to replace Daniel's diesel truck that he has. We've spent more money on repairs on his truck in the last 2 years than I think that truck's even worth anymore. So that is the vehicle we're asking for replacement of this year. You'll also see the 30,000 in the CIP engineering dollars on that page. Now going to page 82, the water reserve. Asking for this year is money to line replacement up in Haystack Heights. This is part of the master plan water line replacement. And we chose Haystack Heights for a couple of reasons. We need to loop that system. It is not currently looped. That's going to take a design development with an engineering team, possibly a property acquirement to be able to loop it. But we feel like that's a good place for us to start with a water line replacement. In addition to that design of the whole haystack, because we're going to learn some things. Are we able to do pipe bursting, what is our process going to be before we start diving into downtown here and especially along Hemlock? So Haystack Heights is a good beta test for us. And we kind of kill two birds with one stone. We have to address the fact that that's not a loop system now. And if we have a breakage, everybody's out. And so we need to address that. So I'm asking to start there. And the two streets is East Harrison, East Chinook. East Harrison would be dollars to not only design it, but actually pull the trigger on construction. The East Chinook, I'm asking for just engineering dollars. So I'm going to take it slow and see what we learn in the process. So the East Chinook engineering design, those dollars should not only get us the design of that actual location, but between those two, we should be able to design that whole neighborhood. That's what I'm hoping.
So all these dollars are just for design.
Yeah,
Except for,
to design and engineer it.
Okay,
Yeah, both.
but no construction.
Yeah, it's synonymous. So we give them what we would like to see done, and then the engineering team comes back and they say, here's a better way to do it. We give them all the conditions, what we want to see at the end of the day. And then it's a collaborative effort between our team and them. And tell us, give us options. Best way to get to plan point A today to point B, where we want to be in the end. Same thing they did with our water tank vetting. Does concrete tank stay where it is? Do we replace it? Try to keep it and, seismically retrofit it? I mean, we went through that whole gamut. They even looked around town and said, where else could we put the tank if the tank's right there? If for some chance the conference center said, well, while you're replacing this, get it off our property, So they went through the whole gamut where we had a plan A and a plan B. And they'll do the same thing when we start doing the water line replacements. And they'll have to do that throughout town. And I know that when we jumped into the water resiliency project, the community, y'all, and the committees were a little bit concerned back when Carolyn was still here that we were taking our eye off of the ball of the water line replacements to get us prepared for emergency management. We really weren't. It was about the pecking order of what was the biggest fire we had to put out and address first. And so, like I say, this is our focus to get back to the water line replacements. And if you recall, they did the Poplar water line replacement. They also did Pacific and Golgana, which was part of the water line replacement project. So we're doing it. We're just doing it in small isolated chunks. Okay. So that's what that money is for. And then, of course, the dollars you see there for water resiliency project, that's our phase $1 we've already got secured and our phase $2. Any questions on that? Input on our approach with Haystack Heights. You guys think that's a wise way to go? You have any input on that you'd like to see us do something differently?
Karen, when would you like to do it?
I would like to do the East Harrison this upcoming budget year. I think they could design and engineer the entire neighborhood. Tell us if the loop system would require property being purchased. And we can go ahead and do East Harrison even before we have that final design. It's a block into block straight pipe replacement.
So that's not Haystack Heights. That's just right over.
Yeah,
here.
I'm sorry. Yes, it is up here to finish the end of Harrison where we did our improvements. Thank you. I'm sorry.
From Spruce to,
Yeah, because we stopped before we got all the way to end of Harrison. Sorry, East Harrison. Chinook is what takes us up to Haystack Heights.
yes,
Yes, thank you for saying that. I was mixing my locations up.
no problem.
But so East Harrison would finish that. We never finished the paving on East Harrison because we had the water line replacement to do. So the last leg of that pipe was part of this water line replacement. We want to do that, finish the overlay on that, then East Harrison all the way to the end of the street will be finished. Okay, then we'll jump up to Haystack Heights, have them engineer that design, tell us if we have to acquire property. And if I'm able to pull the trigger, I'll do the pipe on East Chinook. I just want to see if we're going to get our body or not to give us some help, because if not, I don't think the team can do all that.
I see.
That's why I'm asking for just the engineering dollars right now.
Okay.
And if we get
I like the approach.
I'm sorry,
I like the approach that you're,
with that.
yeah.
But, I mean, it kind of, I think we'll have some lessons learned up in Haystack Heights. And so I think that's a good starting point. And then East Harrison is just finishing what we already started there. And so, I mean, it'll be interesting because if we can't loop the system any other way than to acquire property, that's going to be a decision you guys have to make. You know, the vision that we have, and credit goes to Daniel. He came up with this and said, this is the way we've been looking at it for a long time, what we should do. It's a vacant lot. It's owned by somebody, but nothing's on it. And so the city has a lot of potential there.
What would you like to do with it?
Run the water line through that property.
And maybe something
Okay,
else.
so
Yeah, so the water line would actually come through there to loop that whole area. We put isolation valves in. And then it kind of addresses the challenge that the fire department have, or they feel they have right now, being able to, you know, deal with a structure fire up there because it's not a loop system.
So does that preclude any other use of the property?
We could do something else with that property, and that's what I want to talk to the engineering firm about, see what they think about that, and then bring you some proposals that you might consider to make that an attractive purchase. I mean, we've talked about, Jeff and I have talked about taking an entire snapshot of this entire town and identifying lots that we come to you and say, we feel the city should either acquire this or deem it not buildable, to support some of the things that have come up. And that can be from tree removal. We never want to see this area develop, or we would lose that beauty of the trees in that particular area, to us considering partnering with a contractor that may build some type of small affordable homes or staff housing. I know you guys don't want to be landlords, but I came from a corporation that had this type of a thing set up. Jeff's worked with cities that had something similar to this setup.
We can do all that without being a landlord.
Exactly. And so I've kind of touched on that with some of the local contractors and said, you ever considered partnering with the city? There's a couple homes being built right now that the contractor's building it with the intent of he or she living in it long-term, but it's going to be a rental in the interim. And I said, would you consider creating this as a staff housing if it was a city employee, and it was a good paid, dependable person, and partnering with the city to, you be the landlord, but you do it with us for city housing. And both of them said, absolutely. So we have some opportunities here to address our staffing issues that we struggled with without being a landlord, protect some trees. These houses don't have to be big. So Jeff and I bounced that around. We haven't had the chance to come up for air to even strategically look at this to be able to bring you some. But we kind of need to get in front of it. I mean, there's some prime pieces of property that he and I have looked at on both the north end and the south end, a couple here in Midtown, that I think would be advantageous for the city taking a good look at. So might not be the time to try to acquire with our real estate the way it is, but I think that they're working with Ashley or Bill. There's some opportunity for it to be a win-win for both parties that doesn't necessarily have to be the market value that we're seeing. There's tax advantages to this. And so that I'd like to just throw that stuff out and get the right parties at the table that can make those decisions and ask you guys to consider that. Haystack Heights would be your first step in that direction. And I think the two people that own the lot that we're eyeballing is open to that discussion. So I'd like to bring that to you as quick as I can, so.
I'd like to see that.
Okay, I'll make that happen.
I'm barring consensus with the rest of the
Oh,
group,
yeah.
speaking for myself.
Sure. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, something like that always gets down to how much.
Yes, exactly.
And it's something a little out of the ordinary for the way Cannon Beach has done things in the past.
Right. Okay. All right, next up is 55, that's our water SEC. We've already gone over that. 88 is wastewater. So again, you'll see the same increases that I talked about before. I did drop down our equipment repair and maintenance. Last year was 115,000, this year is 55, and that's simply because of the headway we've made and the improvements you've allowed us to make. So we reduced that. That was purposeful. Operating equipment and tools, we increased that. A little bit in our materials and supplies, as I talked to you about before. Chemicals, we bumped that up quite a bit. The cost of that is up, and we've actually had to use more of our chemicals. There's a couple of reasons for that. Many residents emailed me or texted me about the article that came out recently of what Astoria is doing with the breweries. We have a different situation here. This came up when Richard Bertolotti and Dewey was on the Public Works Committee, and the Pelican was first being proposed. And Bryce and Trevor told me they did a deep dive, they evaluated it. And at that time, based on the size of our plant and the size of these brewery production levels, what they were sending to the plant was actually helping us. So it was sending us food that we actually needed. And so we did not at that time have an issue. I think this is time for us to just come together with the breweries again, because Public Works does not have any formal auditing procedure right now. What I'd like to see is meet with each of the breweries and the restaurants, because we, not only do we see things like the tree roots, but we have fats, oils, and greases that are really into our system. And Mike and Marty and Levi brought that up to me this year, saying they're seeing an increase of this. Some of our breweries are restaurants as well, most of them, but they're landlocked. So they couldn't increase their production that they currently have. None of their facilities will allow an increase in volume. But it doesn't mean that I don't want to sit down with them, because Pelican's a good example. They can bring brew from Pacific City to this location. And that's an increase in their beer that's there. And so that could potentially impact us. And I think it's worthy of a discussion to say, where are you? Where do you plan to be? Any change in that? Talk about the fats, oils, and the greases with those breweries at the same time. And then ask that they either provide us a copy of the report that they have to provide to the state and the feds for their alcohol volumes. They're all required to do that. We're not asking them to do anything extra. We just want to see a copy of the report. That supports, they're telling us they're not changing their volume. If I see a copy of that report, then I know that that's the facts, and that's what we can expect at our plant. And I think that that's a reasonable request. So Trevor and I will be setting that up. Mike, Marty, and Levi will be involved in those discussions, and we're going to set up a quarterly inspection where we go out to the facility and we look, they're maintaining their grease traps, that their production levels haven't changed, and there's some follow-up there. I teetered handing that off to code enforcement. But I really think Public Works needs to be directly involved and have a relationship with these businesses so that they understand the impacts to us when these things aren't maintained. When Pelican had their grease debacle this year, Alton and I went out and we had to crawl down into their basement area that both of us, as short as Alton is, were bent over at the waist, trying to crawl under and looking where they had this failure. And that ended up in our drain system. Luckily, the guys caught it and backed it out before it ever reached anywhere. So we got lucky, and so did they. So I kind of put them on warning that that was their first offense, but we have nothing set up in our ordinance that allows us to penalize them. And I'll be bringing that to you, saying, I think we need to modify our ordinance and set up stronger expectations so in front of this and say, first time's a warning, second time is a citation of some sort. And if it continues more than that, then it should be a tiered penalty. Because just like water leaks, they go on. We have no way to enforce them to fix this stuff. There has to be some sort of a repercussion for those kind of failures that cost us money in the back end.
That's a really good idea because I know Gearhart and their issues.
Yep.
Of course, we don't have septic and all of that to contend with, but it's totally,
Still costs in the back end.
well, and it's kept businesses from opening because
Yep.
they aren't able to
Yep.
maintain.
So that will be what we're working on. We'll ultimately bring some things to you asking to be able to implement something like this, working with our legal staff to see what our rights are as a city to be able to set something up like that. But I just strongly believe that if it's costing us in the back end, the customer needs to bear some of that burden. So.
That's good and proactive. Good.
Let's see here. That's pretty much it for wastewater. The guys have asked for a push camera, which is a locator tool. We have one in water, but that can't be used in wastewater as well. That's not a universal tool, going from sewer to drinking. So I've approved them to get a $15,000 push camera if you approve that. Let's see. And then our engineering fees under CIP projects and non-CIP. The facility maintenance increase under 62580. That's for our magnesium hydroxide storage. And that helps us for the pH balance adjustments for odor control. I've increased the training in the water and wastewater specifically more than the other departments, not only because we have 2 new wastewater guys, but those 2 departments are mandated to get their certs, unlike any of the other departments. And it costs the cities to send them to that training. I have tried really hard to encourage the guys to get in the local training classes so that we save the travel and expense of classes that are taught further away. But this year, the guys convinced me to see it from another perspective. There's a class in Bend that is a much more effectively taught class, not only because of the instructor, but some of the things that they do at that class in Bend that they do not do here in Seaside because it's held in this surf sand conference room. And in Bend, it's held in a different setting. So they get a different level of training, even though it's the same exact class. It's a different level of instruction. So they like to go to the Bend class. I talked to Bruce about that. We did the math of what we're actually paying and gas for them to travel and meals. There's really no difference in the hotel. In fact, if anything, the hotel's cheaper in Bend than it is here. It's really the gas and the meals that we pay for. It's minimal. And so Bruce said he would support that if I was supportive of them going to the Bend class. So I've now left that optional for them. And so that's where we are with training. A nice meeting of the road with the hourly employees. They were not happy when I said you need to be training close to home. It's the same class. There's no reason to send you a boondoggle bin trip. They said it's a difference in the type of instruction. So we came to an agreement on that. And then, of course, we put some money in there for the fats, oils, and grease, because I mean, I may need to get some support in writing that ordinance. We need to set up some fees for that. So if I need to do attorneys or engineering or anything like that.
Karen,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there anything technology-wise changing in the equipment that restaurants can put in for that?
You mean as far as the type of grease trap?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, technology is always changing with those systems. Some people like one system over another system, but I'm not familiar with any recent changes in them.
The only thing I've seen, Brandon, is the larger restaurants use a different type of a grease trap than a smaller one, just simply because of the volume of what they're sitting down there. They may have more than one grease trap if it's a larger restaurant. But a good example recently is we had a retail location convert to a distillery tasting room. And the liquor law requires for spirits, you have to serve food. And so they said, well, everything's packaged. And I told Trevor, sorry, you need to do a grease trap because that food's going to go down the drain somewhere. They'll sit there and they'll eat it at that location and they're disposing of whatever the customer leaves behind. That's going to go down the drain. And so we made them put a grease trap in. They weren't happy, but it was a change of use from a retail to now an establishment that required them to consume food. And so we explained that to them and they put it in. But those are the things that we have to watch for and just not let them slide just because it's packaged food. No.
I'm just, the only reason I'm asking, I was wondering if this is something that we could encourage restaurants to upgrade their equipment and possibly get a better.
I think throughout this process, we're just starting this process. I think during that process and talking with customers, you know,
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea to encourage if we see some deficiencies in their technology.
Usually
encourage
something
them.
like that, Brandon, that's one of the advantages of our quarterly Public Works Director lunches that we were having prior to COVID, and we'll get those started again after all of us get done with budget. But those are the kind of things we talk about at lunch. We'd say, hey, we're going to be working on a fog. What are you guys doing? You know, we would collaborate on all kinds of projects that we were independently working on. Some of us were both working on the same kind of project, but going after it a different approach. And those lunches were very beneficial to talk things over like that. So I've just been doing it by phone until we're able to get back together. And so it's something I'd probably reach out. Bruce was nice enough during one of the city manager calls. He tossed it out and he got me a draft ordinance that another city was using that is much tighter than what ours is. So I would probably plagiarize from that a bit, if you will, to kind of go after this and then bring you guys something to consider.
Thank you.
Okay. The pontoon boat, you'll see the dollars in there for that. We discovered last year we could not purchase the boat for the amount of money we had estimated that it was going to cost us, because most of these folks that do these pontoons are on the East Coast. So the guys had to get a little bit creative. What we ended up doing is we ordered the pontoon itself, which is the mechanism that floats the boat. And then we went to 2 different fabricators and got quotes to have them do the landing and the rails for us, so that we don't pay shipping for the entire boat to come out here. They have to trailer it, and it was horribly expensive. The shipping was almost as much as the boat. And so I said, we got to find a different way to do this. So Mike says, well, if we can get the pontoons, because he couldn't find anybody out here. We even work with Bob Lake that cleans our city hall. He owns a marina. And so he has guys that work on the boats and whatnot. They will, surely goodness, we could find somebody that could build this one, you know. But everyone, both these guys that were fabricators, one's Sopco, we all know this guy's top of the top. He said, you give me the pontoons and I can build your deck and your rails. But you got to get the pontoons. So we ordered that and those are on the way. And then the rest of the money is to be able to get those rails and the platform fabricated. And I told you what happens with metal. So here we are. Just the delay in time of being able to pull the trigger on stuff, cost just keeps going up.
So is this where the phrase, whatever floats your boat comes in?
Because remember, this was our safety issue. These guys got a lift and in the bucket, they were trying to be over the basin doing maintenance, reaching over this thing. It was a total makeshift. It was dangerous as all get out. If any of them had have gone over into those basins, it would have not, this would have been a big OSHA violation. So they were makeshifting this thing. They've done it for years. They had a little boat that they used to go out. It was just ludicrous how we were doing this. The lift itself, what it cost us, I could have ordered a pontoon right then and there. I mean, that thing was so expensive. And so I said, this is Russian roulette here. We need to get the real thing. What is it that you guys need? They said, just need a pontoon, just a flat pontoon that we can deck it out the way we need to with the hoist and all this stuff. And we're good to go. So I said, price it out. And you guys gave us the money and then supply chain happened and all the spikes happened and we were just behind the 8 ball. So that's how we're going to solve that. We're halfway there. And like I say, we got our quotes for the fabrication of the deck and the rail. So this will complete that. So that's it for our wastewater expense. If you go to page 89. Dollar out there. Where's our loan principal and interest identified there? Let's see. Next up. On the expense for wastewater, I'm asking you for Midway and Siuslaw upgrades. That's the generators, for 60,000 each. And I've got the quote from Peterson Cat saying that is what the current quote is. And then the building additions. And we have an estimated quote from O'Brien on that, just as knowing what it's going to cost us. Now, each of those pump stations are cedar shingle siding. So when we do the add-on that houses this generator, and that's one of the reasons why FEMA denied us, is they wouldn't give us a generator when we didn't have an inside place to put it. It's a permanent generator, so it can't sit outside. I said, well, we'll add the building add to that. They said, okay, add it on. Then when they saw the cost, because cedar was going crazy, they said, oh, this is too much. They denied it. I said, well, let me take the building ad off and you just give me the generator. They said, no, you got to show us that you can house it. I'm like, okay, I'm between a rock and a hard place here. I said, how about if I get the city to do the building ad and you give me the generator? So no, for us to approve the generator, you have to show me you can put it inside. I thought, this is crazy. I messed around with this for a year. I could have just gone ahead and done it, So anyway, that's what I'm asking for is, again, master plan project. What this is going to do to us, for us, is in the response time, we now only have 2 locations that we would have to run mobile generators and stuff for. So the response time for the guys is much improved. Plus the improvements that we're making to the existing pump stations is going to improve that. We're not going to have a lot of the ghost calls that we're getting now that the guys are getting up in the middle of the night and running out there trying to diagnose what the heck's going on with these generators that are failing. So once we get the 2 permanents in Midway and Siuslaw, all we have is the Pacific generator that's on the old Gene Coke property that the homeowner does not want us to expand that. So that's always going to be a mobile generator. And then Sitka, which we rarely ever have to row a mobile there because it's so small. So we'll be in a great shape as far as response time. And that's it. This reflects the 9.5 rate increase in wastewater that Maureen has talked about. And then on page 94, of course, is your page 97, we get into storm. Again, the only areas of increase for storm is the materials and supplies, like all the departments. That's a 30% increase in each of the departments was the same. Our engineering fees for any of our shovel-ready projects, this will probably be to assist not only with anything involving storm for the capital, but if we have to move forward on the presidentials, which we know that part of it we will, we'll have to have that engineered. And then you'll see the dollars in there for Jefferson and Jackson. Yeah. So traditionally, when I first came on the city, one thing that Tim Arndt and I would kind of go back and forth about, really for me to understand, because I'd never worked for a municipality before, and Jim had vast experience, of course. I found it strange that the city would let the customer basically build out their streets and their infrastructure. You know, when they would build a home, that's when they would develop the street, extend their storm drain. You know, obviously they put in their water meter and whatnot, but there's still some cost on the city's end. I think the storm drain is where I had the most difficulty getting my arms around that. And I'll give you a couple of examples. When there's an existing home today, and as you guys know, a lot of our little Cannon Beach cabins were never hooked up to city drains. In fact, in a lot of locations on our streets, there are no drains. And so you see a lot of storm down spouts just popped out on people's property. And what happens with that? It runs to their neighbors. And if it happens to be a vacant lot, nobody cares. But as those have become developed, our own ordinance says you can't let your runoff water run onto somebody's property. And then we start getting phone calls and the battles start between the neighbors. And that's great. They have to rectify that. But if there's no storm drain there, what are they hooking up to? And Jim's position was, well, they got to put storm drains in. And I'm like, shouldn't the city meet halfway here? I mean, don't we have responsibility? I could see it if there was a storm drain down at the end of the corner and we said, hey, homeowner, you got to extend that up to your property and hook up to it. I could see that. But a lot of these streets, there's nothing. And so I've plugged money into the budget to say there has to be some halfway point here. Because a person that has a 900 or 1,100 square foot beach cabin that's had it in the family for generations, gets a brand new homeowner built next to them. And the new homeowner says, hey, generational family, you got to get your drains dealt with. You're dumping on my property. These people can't afford to put all new storm infrastructure in a street that has nothing. I think the city needs to work with that homeowner to rectify that problem by putting at least a catch basin and some extension of pipe, and maybe they take it the rest of the way to their property and hook it up. That's something that you guys have to give me direction on. But I think we have these anomalies where it's just not as simple as where we have a street and it exists. Of course, they extend it to their property. And we've done that in many locations, but some of our contractors that have been around here for their lifetime have said, Karen, it's not always been that way. Now, the city always provided catch basins, or the city did some of this. But I have no point of reference other than when Jim was here and he said it's customary for municipalities to say the homeowner has to solve that. And if it means putting infrastructure in, they have to put it in. There's always going to be some kind of freak situations that I think the city can do well to partner and help that. So I've asked to put some money in to help address those. I'll use that discretion respectfully and bring you something that I feel I need direction on, or obviously to Bruce. But I think that a lot of these are pretty simple solutions that we could rectify easily. And so that's what that increase is for.
Oh, Karen, in the example that you used, so there's a new house being built next to an existing home.
Mhm.
What, in your mind, would be happening to the storm system with the new house being built?
Well, I'll give you an example. On Pacific Street between, say, Orford and Siuslaw, that strip along there, there's very few, if any, storm outfall, catch basins. So most of those homes puke out to the beach if they're on the west side of the street. If they're on the east side of the street, they're just popping out on the ground and it's absorbing into the property. But as those lots have been developed, that's become problematic. And those people have had to put in some infrastructure and it's been expensive. Another examples on the north end, Coaster did 2 remodels mid-block. And on Larch or Laurel, I can't remember which.
Large.
Just down from Jan, there was a catch basin at the end of the block, almost to the corner, and another one on the other end towards Fifth, but nothing in mid-block. So when he did both of those remodels in the middle of that block, I said, it's your choice. You can go from this corner to that corner, but there's an existing system there. It's up to you to extend the pipe and hook up to us. To me, that was reasonable. Not happy. So that's the anomaly I'm talking about, is when there is nothing for the customer to work with. I feel the city has some shared ownership in that. When there's existing, then I think we've made our capital investment, and then they have to meet that. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Luckily, we don't have a lot of that, but we do have some areas in town where we don't have storm drains, and mostly because they've made habits of burping out on the beach, and OPRD doesn't like that. And as our shoreline is changing, which Jeff will get to show you when he does his drone mapping, you can see the significant changes. You're seeing it this year with all the scarps we're having. All those pipes are now exposed, whereas before they were hidden. So when you walk along the shore, you see just how many of those homes are burping out onto the beach. And sometimes the people on the east side have actually extended and hooked up to a private person's pipe going out to the beach.
They may
Not
have,
city stuff
I mean, it may have been preferable to do that
back then.
than to let someone's water drain onto your property.
That's right. We just found kind of a makeshift storm drain that a homeowner contacted us on Pacific down near our pump station. And he wasn't sure what it was, and said, would you come take a look at this and tell me, is it storm? What is it? So the guys went and looked. It's an old metal corrugated storm pipe. When that was put in, who knows? One of the houses was from the 30s. The other one was from the 60s. And so at some point or another that was put in, wasn't the city's. But they're asking us, we have a failed sump pump, what do we do with this water? So they have to get the sump pump fixed, and they have to pump it up to Pacific where we do have a catch basin. Otherwise, that drain's probably going out to the beach somewhere, but it doesn't belong to us. So there's those kind of weird things that some of them, like I say, I feel the city has some some role in helping resolve that. Others, I think, there's infrastructure in place, they just have to meet it, and unfortunately, it is at their cost. We've made our financial investment.
I support what you have just said.
Okay.
I obviously think there's something that's going to need to be done. What? I know it's on the SDC, but that's part of every new house. Is a part of that fees going toward
Yes.
normal.
Yeah,
But that does nothing for the example that you used.
exactly.
What I guess what I was trying to allude to was.
SDCs are on brand.
1 second, that existing home should be able to tie somehow into whatever the new home is going to have brought to it, is what I'm thinking.
Maybe the new home doesn't need to. Maybe they do a wet well on their, a dry well on.
I guess you're right. Yeah,
So there would be no hookup to anything.
okay.
But if they did, then you're right, there'd be a shared responsibility. They both invest to make that connection.
Okay,
But we don't always have those situations. That's why I say we get these little freak anomalies like this, and I have no funding to be able to address it. So I found myself kind of behind the 8 ball, trying to find somewhere in my operating budget that I can help address this. And like I say, it doesn't come up that often, but when it does, I need to be prepared to try to help resolve it.
okay,
And so that's another thing that we're doing is tightening up our road standards a bit more, where the language is more clear, because we go by the ODOT best practices, as most cities do. And then you alter that based on the uniquenesses of your community that fall outside of those industry standards. Like us, we don't have curbs and sidewalks and storm drains everywhere. And so we need to, be more clear on what we expect people to do. All right. Right here. That's pretty much it on our storm drain fund on 97. Our reserve residential outfalls. That is if OPRD does not like our proposed permit application that's in front of them. We're going to be meeting with them tomorrow. I'm hoping that they will take our proposal and we do it this in 2 phases. We're proposing that Jackson and Jefferson, the storm drain that was on here, is phase 1. We combine those 2 with a similar ground filtration system that we did up on 7th and Oak, which they liked. If that proves to be effective in the presidentials, because that area is much different than Oak. 7th and Oak, we had a lot of bandwidth to work with. And presidentials, we don't. So if that fails, the potential for flooding in that residential area is significant to those homeowners. So we're asking them to let us approach this in a little more conservative fashion. Let's try combining those 2, the same design that we did up on 7th and Oak, but that's going to be out in the street on Ocean and the dune area. And if that proves to be successful over a total year of winter season, then we'll go back and address Monroe and Madison, of which they want us to also address. So they want all 5 of those outfalls to be modified similar to what we did on 7th and Oak. We're just not sure that it's possible in that area. So our request is they let us do phase 1 of those 2, and then the next season, we come back and talk about if it's effective, we will forward with the other 3 outfalls. So Windsor has developed an outstanding design. I feel confident that they're going to like it, but they may come back and say, I like it, you should be able to do all 5. And we're not going to let you do it in phases. So we'll see tomorrow. We're going to meet. They've done a change in regime. They've done a whole staffing change. The folks that we've been working with is great. They brought Jay back to try to help Eric when he was sitting in, kind of get this permit through its process, through its phases of the review process. And so now Jay's done. They've named a permanent person. We're going to be meeting him tomorrow for the first time. But like I say, I'm feeling confident. I'll knock on wood. Hopefully I'm not jinxing myself, but I'm hoping that they'll let us do that in the 2 parts. And then everybody's happy. Okay. So that's what that money's for. I asked for the whole banana. So if they refuse me in the phases, I can cover it and not have to come back to you. But if they say not phase 1, then I will underrun this. Okay. And then, of course, storm drain STC on page 102. I don't know, we'll go over that again. And let's jump into roads, page 105. Increases with fuel, the diesel, and just gasoline. An increase in our materials and supplies, mostly to just address the whole signpost increase of the lumber and what the market trends we're seeing on decals and cold mix patch and that type of stuff. You'll also see the engineering costs of $40,000 for non-CIP projects to have those shovel ready. And pavement preservation, we did jump that up by 20% because of what's happened with oil. It's caused asphalt to really spike up. But I have also told you guys that I'm going to ask for that increase, but I am challenging them to stay within the levels that we're currently doing overlays and not increase the number of streets. And we have the spreadsheet that Cruz has kept since, I think, the 70s. It is a manual Excel spreadsheet. And they do a visual audit every year, and they modify the condition of the streets. And so we base all of our overlays off of those. We take the worst condition streets and go after them first. We also have to consider what infrastructure has to be improved. So if it's an overlay we'd like to do, but it's like a large where it requires a sewer and a storm improvement, we may not have the budget to do it. So the overlay gets delayed. But we're taking the streets that are in the worst condition. I go over all that with the Public Works Committee, and we collaborate on what's going to be brought forward for overlay. Unless it's a gravel to pavement, and we've done none of those other than what we brought you with the private party asking, the city isn't making any moves to go from gravel to pavement anywhere in town.
You don't have any grade challenge streets left?
Not that we feel would be beneficial to pave at this time. We do have some. But the one that is probably the most costly for us to maintain, the homeowners have said the city approved many years ago to never pave it. And that's up by the Harding development. I'd love to pave it, but I understand the city's made some commitments there. I think once all that development is done, we might want to look at that and then do the math and say really what makes sense, because nowadays the ability to control the water is almost easier when it's paved than when it's gravel, especially if it's highly traveled. And unfortunately, that street gets a lot of traffic. It may be because of the situation, and we'll have to assess that. But when it's highly traveled, it's expensive for the city to maintain gravel because we're constantly out there grading, and that's expensive. We can't do it ourselves. We don't have the equipment to create a crown on a gravel street. And so we can do the minor grading to clean up potholes and roll it. But to keep the contour, to control the water, And gravel, where it has crown and can direct the water on a steep street, is really expensive. So in the long run, you're better off paving it cost-wise. So that's all that we do the deep dive and then bring to you and say, this is where it makes sense. Haystack Lane was a wise pave. So streets like that, yeah, for sure. But right now, we have none of those on the block. And then, of course, the engineering fees. Talawah vehicle ramp. I'm asking for engineering money because we didn't have a TSP. This, once again, did not qualify for consideration for grant funding. We have to have a TSP. I convinced the folks that if we even got it into a draft status, would they consider that if the timing for me to be invited to submit an application came before you guys had actually approved it, if it was in draft status, would the funding source approve it? And they said yes, but we're not there. So I'm asking for engineering money because what I did is I went back to OPRD since this is actually on their property. Even though we own the ramp, it sits on. So they, as property owners and being a state park, they have access to funding, even grant-wise, that the city would not have access to. So I made a proposal to OPRD, if I got a design and an engineered plan, that they pursue the funding and they put it out to bid and get the job done for us. And they said, we're in. So I would really appreciate this being funded. We're going to go after multiple things here. We're going to get rid of that costly switchback. It costs us a lot of money every year cleaning off. There's been people that did a face plant over into that thing. It's just a poor design. We're going to implode that. We're going to move that vehicle ramp over. OPRD has all agreed to this. We're going to incorporate the ADA access to that vehicle ramp, similar to a ramp that was done up north that I have the design for. And we're also going to work with a surf shop over here and incorporate the adaptive surfing for the disabled to have access in that area. All three of those things. So there's a lot of grant money that's going to be available to us because it's our own emergency vehicle access. So we got money, that category. We're doing ADA improvement, so we'll have some ADA grant money available. And we're doing the adaptive surfing, which we think is going to be another option. And State Park said they can chase all that for us. So you said, you bring me a design and an engineered plan and we'll go after the funding. Great. So that would be, I think, money well spent. And that's master plan project. That's it for. Let's see. I won't go over roads SDC, you already know that. Page 110. The bridge reserve on page 112. You know what we're doing with that. Civil West is taking that FEMA grant for us. Finish the review. It's already started, kind of bring that up to par with where we are with seismic opportunities. That will ultimately bring a report to you that says this bridge can be retrofitted successfully, or we don't feel it can, and you should consider a rebuild. And here's what something might look like.
Do you expect that?
I'm sorry.
When do you expect to get that?
Well, again, it's one of those FEMA things. Unfortunately, FEMA, they invite you to apply, but they don't ever give you any updates. And like our generator thing, I just say it went on for a year. In their defense, it was kind of like Business Oregon, where they're so understaffed to be able to process these things. That's what adds your time to it. That's why I don't like to chase FEMA grants for something that's kind of a crisis or critical, because you can really find yourself in a cost difference dinking around with that. So now I've kind of learned from experience, and I say, okay, those won't be grants we take. So to answer your question, I don't know, Mike. Civil West has quite a bit of experience with this, much more than I ever would have. And so they may be able to accomplish a little more than I did. I'm hopeful. The gentleman that works for Civil West now is a former public works director in another large municipality that retired and went to work for them. And so he's got some good connections, and he feels pretty hopeful that we're going to get this grant. So I'm hoping. And then lastly, page 129. That's our administrative services. The only thing, protective clothing for myself and Trevor to keep our footwear up to par. Keep the training the same, putting Trevor through some online courses for him to be able to have certifications that we can inspect and send reports relative to our clean spoils site up in Southwind, where when we do road jobs, we can take clean spoils up there, which reduces the jobs when the contractor's not having to drive materials or Astoria like years ago. And then, of course, the admin Lori would modify to show the head count we're asking for. And that's it, folks.
That's all.
Thank you, Karen.
It's not a big ask this year as far as our operating budget. I'm pretty proud of us that we've really driven a lot of efficiency and tightness, and that we've really put all of our energy toward master plan projects and projects that we feel is going to be a good return on the investment for the city, like Lavana Ramp. And then obviously the head count is to be able to manage and execute those projects that we got all this funding for. Those projects all come with timeframes on the funding. You have to do the drawdowns. You have to be able to spend that money within a committed time frame, and you have to do all the reporting associated with that. So we don't have a lot of time to mess around. We need to get the RFPs out, get the project designed and engineered. And we have some pre-design on this stuff because we had to figure out what the dollar amount was going to be. So we're a little bit ahead of the game in that. So whoever wins this RFP, they're going to hit the ground, and they're going to take that pre-engineered and they're going to give us a full engineered plan. And then they are going to put out the RFP to construct. But our team still has to oversee that. So somebody has to project manage that and help report all those milestones, just like we're doing for Matanuska.
I'm so happy to see that the master plans are being implemented and with priorities. I remember the criticisms of the master plan. Oh, just another fancy report sitting on a shelf.
Yep.
This is not just a fancy report sitting on the shelf. It's a document that helps us provide the services this community requires.
Yeah.
And do it effectively.
Yep.
And when we did that, at least I hadn't anticipated such success in getting grants to help finance this, because it was almost overwhelming. Look at it.
Yeah.
And again, it was one of those things, 20-year plan. Oh my God, we can't do it. But we are doing it in a way that makes a lot of sense. So again, I'm just so glad we did the master plan, because it's been such a powerful tool that help us as we go through our annual projects.
Yeah. And that's really the way I look at Jeff's TSP. And so some of those engineering dollars that we're talking about in here is in preparation that if you guys approve that, he's going to want me to start getting some of those projects. And I have to have some engineering to do that. And so it's going to get us the real cost value of what this would be to implement some of these, to take it to the parks or public works and ultimately the planning and DRB to say, are we going for, is it green light or not? You guys, and let you know the results of that. I have to have money to vet those projects, just like I'm doing for water and wastewater. And that's what I was getting last night with the comments. I really, the credit really goes to the Public Works Committee. I've got one of the best Public Works committees that we've had. You know, when Carolyn was here, it was phenomenal. I was scared to death when she was leaving. I hated to see her go. She was truly a partner of staff. But this current team has kept right up in lockstep with that. And like I say, I keep in touch with Carolyn. She keeps tabs and I say, hey, check, done. So she's happy. She's rooting us on from a distance. And this team hasn't missed a beat. And then, of course, my Public Works team, I tell them, keep your Christmas list going all year long. And when the boss comes and says, we've got some money, what could you spend it on? I need to have 5 or 6 projects ready to go, saying, I could do this, I could do that, ready to pull the trigger. And the only way to do that is to have engineering funds to be able to tee those up and say, we're ready to roll. And so we've made headway on the master plan because that's what we're constantly looking at. And we'll plug something in that may not be a master plan project, but supports the master plan overall arching umbrella, like the pump station work that we're doing. Not every pump station is in the master plan, but the majority of all the ones we've touched are. And but the team's done a good job on it. Mike and the team, losing Bryce, they've stepped up and they put a pecking order to all 9 of our pump stations. And we identified the ones that are in the worst condition, putting us at the biggest risk of overflow because the response time, it doesn't matter if they're there instantly. We're having so many failures that it just puts us behind the 8 ball. And so once we map that out, they were just hard charging after that.
Great.
So they're the ones keep an eye on the ball. I just find the money for them and they blaze forward. So thank you for supporting us on that. Questions, comments, anything you'd want me to focus on that I have not considered or you feel I've missed the mark on?
I think you've been very thorough and really applaud your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You too, Trevor.
Oh.
You got to stop talking so much, Trevor.
It's hard to quiet it down.
Trevor's the guy that goes out and says, all right, you guys, if we don't get this done, you're going to see the dark side of her. We don't want to go there.
Who's next?
Okay.
Any thoughts on?
Propose we move on. I mean, stop today and go for the next meeting.
We're halfway through.
Everyone was.
That's usually where we're at.
Yeah, okay.
Accolade, but,
Okay,
well,
We can finish early.
propose to stop today and continue next week.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I will ask the chamber, let them know that we have a meeting with the 11th or whatever.
Today's
A meeting coming up and then another one.
Today's the 11th.
Yeah,
Which day are you referring to, Bruce?
well, we have 2 more meetings. I'll give them the dates of both and ask them which one they want to come to present, but they have an obligation.
16 is our next meeting.
By the 16th. And then there's what, 26? There's an available time.
That's the over, we need it.
Right,
Have a
but
calendar. I don't know.
they have not been involved
Document.
in a couple of budget sessions. COVID made somewhat of a difference. But they are supposed to have their board do a presentation.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're trying to get.
May 16, which is Monday, and then May 26 is Thursday.
Correct.
Better if they could come.
That's when we can
Maybe.
get as, times when we can get them.
Yeah.
Christie, do you want to follow up on Robin's question last night or just shoot her the email on that total of
Send it.
admin?
We'll send, we can send an email, send it to everybody.
Bruce, to follow up about the chamber, I don't know how everyone else feels, but it's fine with me if they made a Zoom presentation. They weren't physically here to serve me. If it made it easier for them to do it.
Yeah, what they have tended to offer is we'll send Jim,
Mhm.
but I think that like Jim and I talk in their board and you talk. So if
You'd
it's,
like to see their whole board.
well, pardon?
I'd like to see some board members
Yeah.
as well as Jim.
Okay, I don't want to speak.
Well, I just think that that's, appropriate at this level. That if you all are making decisions as the budget committee, that you're hearing from their board. Jim will do a lot of the presentation, but
You bring up a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. I was just thinking that he would give us an overview, but
yeah, and if, to me, your policy is about whatever money we might give to them. And I think in my mind, if you have a question about what they're planning, it's up to their board to say, well, we change the path, we feel strongly and this is why, and not the director. And so that's why I think that you need to have that conversation. Because frankly, it's been so long that we don't even know what it is with the funding.
I completely agree with what you're saying, so no problem with that.
But I'll try to get the 16th, and if not, 26th. Okay,
Before we adjourn, I kind of neglected Alicia and Greg on Zoom a little bit today. Did you guys have any questions? Greg, are you heavily medicated still or what?
Hope it's good drugs.
Obviously, he is.
He's not showing us the camera,
Yeah, no, there's nothing pretty to see here. But I am two days off the meds. No, you were very thorough. There's, what I look for when listening to this are like, what are the big ticket changes and items that are glaring over years past? And I didn't see anything there. So I thought it was very well put together. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Alicia, you good?
I'm good. I was listening for, a lot of the discussion about SDCs and about your grants and about the grease trap discussion was interesting to me because we have that challenge in the community that I also live in part-time. And of course, one of my issues is someday undergrounding more utilities. I'd love to talk about that more, but I had to step away and maybe you covered that. So.
Yeah. And thank you for sending me those other funding opportunity. I'm hoping if we get this person that's something I can get them to chase for me. And so that's part of the qualifications in the job description is that they've had some experience in that world of procurement, loans, grants type of thing, Crest does some of our grant stuff, but there'll be some grants that come along with low interest loans that are kind of hand in hand, that person should be chasing just one focus, Thanks for that info. I always appreciate, you're like my Carolyn, you give me a lot of good info all throughout the year and I like that.
I appreciate all the work that you do, all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
See you in another